Welcome to the Continuous Improvement Podcast, episode 1.
Yeah.
I am Devin Bedoni.
And I am Uriel Eisen.
You want to give us the rundown on what we're trying to do here?
Yeah. So, sort of looking at TPS, lean, continuous improvement, whatever you want to call it. Basically, there's a ton of content out there on from companies who have been doing this stuff for like 10, 20, 30 years, 50 years in some cases. And so it's super polished and maybe a little bit opaque for me getting into it, kind of understanding how to take those ideas and actually apply it to the business I'm running, and you are running. And we talk quite frequently. And a lot of it is surrounding kind of how to think about these improvements, time spent, money spent. Do you do an hour a day or an hour a week, or just kind of how to balance working on the business versus working in the business. And it's been really inspiring, a lot of the reading and tours I've been watching, and I know you've sort of also
Dabble.
Yeah. But just inspiring to see the results people get, because I've felt personally that it's given me kind of permission to spend a little bit more time than feels responsible sometimes, but seemingly it seems to pay off. And so I think just sort of trying to figure out where that line is, money spent, hours spent, all that. And so the goal here would be sort of just to give an inside and live view of us kind of testing out ideas, learning new things, and applying them to our businesses and seeing how they work. So
Yeah. And I think I would add to that, just my personal perspective is that often when we see those polished snapshots of businesses at a certain stage, it furthers the idea that lean manufacturing, Toyota Production System, et cetera, is a set of tools,
yes,
not a process. And so I think we're trying to add visibility to the process, especially at the dirty, ungainly, awkward beginning,
100%,
where most of us will find ourselves, assuming we start. And then I think my personal goal is, a personal goal is to help dispel the idea that lean manufacturing and these sorts of processes only apply to production processes, i.e., serial production of the same thing.
Right. You're doing a job shop.
I'm doing a job shop. And there's often people say, well, it doesn't have to be serial, but we do our own product. Thinking about like the closet doctor situation, where I think it'd be very easy for people to say, well, that's all custom, but it's all their own product, so they can optimize. And I think my personal goal is to see how far we can take this with basically whatever comes in the door within reason.
Yeah. And I guess for me, I think a goal would be, dispelling the concept of a list of tools that should be applied. And if you have those things, you are lean. The more I've read and the more I've kind of seen tours, it's so much more about building a culture of continuous improvement where every day is an opportunity to test existing systems and flag abnormalities and flag issues, and just have the presence of mind and the awareness to say, like, why am I going back to find this email a second time? Like, what's happening there? What's the information gap? How could I alleviate that problem? Rather than every day just being like kind of a slog of getting to the end, having produced as much stuff, but every day there's kind of there's no improvement. And I've now toured a company or two, and it's very interesting. It seems so tempting. And in reading these books, they're so geared at big existing organizations who are trying to go lean. And all of the books are basically like, don't treat it as a list of things you have to implement. Rather, start kind of analyzing every day. So I've definitely found that to be true. I implemented Kanban, and then only now I'm discovering that I think basically everyone I see on the internet is kind of not doing it. Right. I mean, if it's benefiting them, then great. But
Sure.
We've definitely learned a lot recently.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. For a little background, I guess, my shop is a job shop primarily. We do a handful of our own products, but that's a few percent of our total revenue.
mm-hmm.
There's myself, two basically full-time employees. We're in 800 square feet, more or less, with an additional 250 square feet of unheated space for stock storage, chip storage, and a saw. 3 mills, one lathe, and we're trying to turn out a lot of product in this very small space. Our niche markets are custom bicycle industry. That can include parts for frames or components for other companies that design and market them,
Mm-hmm.
as well as some automotive stuff, some just general commercial, some architectural. So that's kind of our super brief rundown is our markets. We tend to work on parts that fit in your hand. Some of these parts require two hands, but beyond that, we can't really handle them. So we limit to that sort of scale.
Nice. And we are, so I run austere manufacturing. We manufacture CNC buckles, high performance buckles. Think like all the buckles and clips on a backpack. We don't do all of them yet, but hopefully we'll get there. And we are in a little over 300 square feet, one Brother Speedio S1000, and then just a bunch of auxiliary equipment, blasting, tumbling, that kind of stuff. And I think just going back, I think we kind of started. So we met when I bought the machine, and the seller introduced us. And I think we sort of started talking in a way that was interesting, not just to me, but also to you. Because I called Devin quite a bit at the beginning to very basic questions. Was sort of around looking at scaling my production. So we were producing a very small number of parts and then went to tombstones. So just fixtures that held 8 op 1 and 8 op 2. And then sort of very quickly realized that was not going to work. And we started talking about whether to automate, whether to put it on a big fixture. And I think that's sort of where we both started reading about lean and TPS.
Yeah, I think it's a little like embarrassing looking back, honestly, but I have been very, formed by the culture of machining. And there are a lot of things that people take for granted, or, production in general, not just machining, all kinds of manufacturing. There are things that people accept as the truth. And I had accepted a lot of truths, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And watching, I think because you sort of like were at a size and place in your business where you had the freedom to experiment, you were like, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. And then it did. And I was like, interesting. But yeah, I think that's where, so it's been very illuminating for me to watch your process and inspiring to change my process accordingly. And definitely you diving into that stuff and sharing some of your experience was motivation for me to start reading more, evaluating what in my process was just sort of like common knowledge, quote unquote, that was not correct and what really was.
And just to put some numbers on things, I mean, I think what kind of opened my eyes a bit was just reading the background and people, and not to get like sales pitchy about lean, but people like multiplying their profits pretty substantially in not a lot of time with the, with taking a full hour out of an 8-hour day away from production and toward improvement. And I just thought that was so interesting. There was a company tour a little ways east of here where 8,000 person shop, union, 8-hour production day. They took an hour off of production every single day for a year. And by the end of the year, they were producing the same amount as they did the previous year. So they didn't drop in production over the total, complete 12 months. And by year 3, I think they tripled their profits.
Well,
so like, and you would never look at that and go like, okay, yeah, this is a great plan for our profitability.
sure.
It's just so interesting. Yeah.
By traditional metrics and traditional comprehension of,
it just seems
business.
Impossible that you would gain
really
so
does.
much efficiency
Yeah.
by losing time on production. I mean, that's pretty mind blowing. And then also just like looking at Toyota and just a brief history. I mean, not a complete history by any means, but the first oil crisis, I think, is when people kind of opened their eyes because Toyota was not hemorrhaging cash and everyone else was.
Sure.
And their profits dropped, but they're still profitable.
Right.
And everyone else was really not profitable. So and I don't know. Again, I think that's just been really empowering to me to kind of take that time. But maybe we should talk about some specifics we're actually dealing with now.
Let's do it. Yeah. You wanna lead off with your focus on overproduction?
Yeah, sure. So I just read The Goal and Critical Shane.
I've not read either of them.
Well,
I've read the cliff notes of The Goal. I felt like that was enough.
Keep it there. I found his choice to write a novel. So this guy writes about production optimization, essentially, and chose to write a novel, which is kind of a bold choice because he's not a great fiction writer. I mean, he's an amazing thinker, and I think a lot of the tools for analysis are really interesting, but buried in like bad storyline.
He's just living his best life. You got to believe in yourself.
But there was a lecture at the end that was, and an article he wrote that were super interesting. But what we've sort of seen, so I thought we had to buy a new milling machine. I've probably been talking about that for like a year at least. Out of being in business around 2 years.
Or is it 3 already?
I think it's coming up on 3. Yeah,
it's coming up on 3. Yeah,
coming up on 3 in March. So I thought I had to buy a new mill. For those who don't know, a mill is north of $100,000 typically, depending what you're buying, but sort of what I was looking at. And then discovered that we were basically just suffering from overproduction. And so we were making too many of one part, which meant that the next day we'd have a ton of part A, but not enough of part B to actually ship anything. So, or realistically, not enough of part B to paint what we had to paint to then go on to ship, the following day. So in the book, he basically talks about finding your bottleneck, finding your constraint, and then not seeking local efficiency on other processes, but actually just making sure that constraint is maximized, where you're getting the most through that one point. And then the other piece that has really been like, I've been repeating in my head a lot is he mentioned optimize for availability. And I thought that was a really interesting, concise way of getting that point across.
Can you elucidate a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, like when I'm running the mill, it's very tempting as the operator, like other people run it too, but as the operator, it's very tempting. I have one part set up. So like the body of our buckle. So it's the body, the cam, and the pin. So I'll have the body set up and it's running fine. And I know I need quite a few of them. And so it's very tempting as the operator to just keep running them for half the day, the whole day, whatever, because there's so many other projects to work on.
Right.
We've spent a lot of time getting our setup times down. So the SMED system, very catchy name, Shigeo Shingo, single minute exchange of dies. We've put a lot of effort into that. And our changeovers are about 3.5 minutes to 5 minutes, depending how smoothly things go.
Nearly inconsequential.
Yeah, super, super fast. But still,
does that include all of the like accessory processes? That assumes that you have.
That's walking up to the machine to hitting cycle start.
Are there, I guess what I'm asking, are there other processes that have to be, that feed that are challenging in any way? Like is there other embedded time invested in that changeover, or is that just like all else being equal?
Yeah, that's assuming we have stock on hand, which is a Kanban
But that's
item.
the only thing.
Yeah. I mean, unless something goes wrong, which we can talk about, like the jaws get damaged.
Sure.
And then that really messes things up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's really tempting as the operator to just keep that thing running. And that's what we were doing because we knew we needed a lot of them. So like if we had a big order, we were like, okay, well, we need 500 of these things. So let's run 100 or 200 to,
Yeah.
And the problem was the next day we'd go to do our paint and we wouldn't have any cams. So we could paint the bodies, but we couldn't paint the cams. And in my head, I was like, man, we're running out of parts. We need another mill. And so actually what we started doing only like 6 weeks ago, it's kind of realizing that, which I don't know why it took us so long to realize this, but just actually making the parts in the order they were triggered. And so
sure.
Making
it's very obvious once you say it.
Yeah, it's like make 24 bodies, then switch to making cams, then switch to making pins, then back to bodies, back to cams, back to pins.
Right.
And the funny thing is, it's so tempting to not do that. And it's still tempting. Yesterday, I have to admit, I was in the middle of something else. The mill stopped and I was like, well, it's better to have it running than not have it running. So I walked over, reloaded it, and it takes about 30 seconds, 40 seconds to reload and hit cycle start. So I was still guilty of the temptation to not do a changeover.
Did you have time for a changeover?
I mean, define have time.
5 minutes. I guess it's nearly inconsequential.
Nearly inconsequential, but you are in the middle of a different project.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to kind of pop out, pop back in.
That like interior judgment call is extremely challenging.
Yeah. And so I will say I'm getting better at it, and I hope I don't keep doing that. But and actually I have an update to how we want to run that. So that's sort of been it. And in changing how we're doing that, we are increasing the inefficiency at the milling station. We're using more labor, we're having less spindle uptime, and yet the whole company runs smoother and we can produce a lot more sellable product without investing another $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's been a huge win in a funny way by doing all the opposite things that are sort of like, that just seem obvious. And I think that's like kind of been a theme is like, and if you look at industry, like most companies are not lean.
Yeah.
Right. And why is that? Like, there's not stupid people. It's just the part that's kind of mind blowing is like a lot of the things are just completely
counterintuitive,
the opposite of what you would think you should do.
There's that. I think there's also just the conventional wisdom that that's really hard to break free of.
Yeah.
Because it takes serious analysis.
But why is it conventional wisdom? I mean, we got here
because it's simple. It's easy. I think it's simple to say running spindles make money.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm guilty of this similarly every day.
Right.
Where it's same thing. It's like, I'm not going to get to that. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
And I'm just forcing myself to be like, the job's done. Let the machine sit.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like the people time, the people distraction, especially, is not worth it. Even if it's just loading a bar every half an hour.
Right.
Which it's not, because it's also like, then you also have to get those parts out of if it's a lathe, get those parts out of the parts catcher. You have to sort them. You have to count them. There's a lot of added labor. And so forcing myself to be like, don't spend time, especially my time, because I am a bottleneck in the company.
Same.
Don't spend time on something that is not necessary. The customer didn't order it.
Right. Interesting. And sorry.
Yeah. And take myself away from things that, while they don't seem as pressing, are absolutely necessary.
Yeah. And I think the sort of what kind of messes with your head a little bit is, right, it is a big interruption to jump back and forth. But what is totally worthwhile is flagging why that is, right on the whiteboard. So we have a whiteboard for all the improvements we want to make, or just flagging issues. We try to not to write solutions, but just write the problem we're having. And time again, like stopping to go like, okay, I don't want to stop what I'm doing to restart the whatever because of all these auxiliary things. Like just listening to that. Could you have a part counter that's really easy to reset and is obvious on the lathe? So just like a macro or whatever that you can see, or like all these other things.
That assumes you don't make scrap.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's easier to count your scrap than it is to count your total parts.
Interesting.
So yes.
Yeah. Or you get in. Yeah. Zero Quality Control, another of Shigio's books. Yeah, I don't know. So the bit about Kanban I'll share is, I think there's 6 rules of Kanban. I don't remember them off the top of my head, from Toyota.
Do you want me to look them up?
Yeah, sure. And the last one is reduce the number of Kanban you have present. So basically, it's like nothing travels without a Kanban. Well, we can just read them off the internet. But
ready?
Yeah.
Never pass on defective products. Take only what is needed. Produce the exact quantity required. Level the production. Fine-tune production, and stabilize and rationalize the process. But
that's
that doesn't.
Funny. That's a different 6 than
that's a different 6. That sounds like the general. That's kind of an overview of the TPS.
Yeah, I almost brought it. Anyway, the point is, so Kanban is a super useful tool. For those who don't know, it's basically putting typically a physical trigger in your stock, such that when you hit a predetermined minimum, it automatically reorders parts. And that should be everything in the shop. And in fact, a lot of people recommend starting with non-essentials. So like your bathroom cleaning products.
Yeah.
Any time you spend going, oh, we're out of this thing, well, let me walk over and talk to so-and-so to tell them to reorder it. Or I forget where we ordered it. Let me jump on the internet and find it again. That is all waste. That's all non-value add. And so it's just putting a physical trigger that just quickly reminds you to order it, and has all the relevant information, and can have a QR code. So you just scan it with your phone and hit add to cart immediately. And it takes like a minute, and it's amazing. Anyway, so yeah, basically tuck in a piece of paper that says like, reorder this object. Here's where we bought it. Here's how many you should order, all that. So there's no thinking involved when you have to reorder something. But because of that last rule, my suspicion is that people who copied Toyota and their Kanban system, which is essentially where it came from, saw a 2-bin system where there is always one bin that's being currently pulled from, which means its Kanban card has already been triggered, which I think you don't see.
Sorry, say that again.
So there should be, if it's a 2-bin system, it means you've reduced your Kanban quantity down to 2. You can go down to 1, which means that you deliver a bin
and you have an empty.
You just empty out the first bin, and then you pull the card for the second bin and start working through the second bin. So that's what people saw. And so most people have one Kanban trigger in a pile, and that's it. Because that's what we've seen. Because Toyota has been doing this since the 60s. And so they've been at it for quite some time. And so they have followed their own rule of reducing the number of Kanban. The issue with that is, if you have, say you order like 100 parts and then your Kanban quantity is 10, you're basically not allowing information to flow upstream. Like, say you use that first 10 and then that second 10 and the third 10. There's no trigger until you hit the 10.
Sure.
And so we kind of realized in rereading Toyota production system, we added a Kanban to every single bin of our parts that get pulled into the paint department from machining. So rather than just having we would produce basically 3 bins of 32 and then a Kanban and then a 4th bin. And so we would just use them and then only trigger it once we hit that last bin. And then we tried moving that Kanban one up. So we'd have 2 bins behind the Kanban. But none of that really worked. What has worked is having a Kanban card in every single bin. So every time we pull a bin, that triggers reorder. And it triggers it in the order and in the amounts we're using the various products.
So you've determined that you need the inventory of 4 bins worth of material or parts, but you need to trigger after the first bin is used.
Yeah, and immediately replenish it, because we can paint a maximum of 4 of those bins in a day. And gotcha. So that's sort of the amount. And
this is 4 bins of the same part? Or
and that leads into a lot of other things we're working on to get the lead time down. But from the time of a reorder to actually delivering it is not as fast as we'd like it to be.
Sure. And so this is kind of what you're talking about is this is really a inventory balancing question.
Sort of, but it's also an information flow question. So like looking at information flowing up through the company and then products flowing back out of the company. Anytime, like people talk a lot about production flow, which is like nothing should be waiting, nothing should be sitting.
Sure.
I think that should also be, excuse me, applied to information, where like you have an order from the customer that flows up to, I don't know, someone who has it sit in their inbox for 3 days. And then they get around to ordering materials for that thing. Like all that is information that's sitting and not flowing. And so you're not flowing the value back to the customer.
Right.
And then the last piece, and then I'll hand over the mic, is basically optimizing for availability. So the last update that I just have been thinking about over the last couple of days, I'm not sure how well it will work. I'm a little bit suspicious of it because it's not how Toyota does it. Not that we all are Toyota, but they've tried a lot of things. Is basically putting those Kanbans on a board at the mill. So when paint pulls a bin of parts, that Kanban card goes in a slot that is for that part on the mill. And then the mill always runs the top Kanban cards such that we're always optimizing for availability. So it would tell you that you're always producing the part that is least in stock.
Yeah.
Because yesterday I sort of looked over and I saw that we were out of one particular part, but that was not the thing that the Kanban cards told me I should produce. So
interesting.
I reshuffled it, but that's obviously all waste.
Yeah.
Just one tiny piece, and then you should talk about what you've been thinking about. Is in looking at work in a workshop, basically people find that about 85% of time is non-value add. Mm-hmm. And so, 85 to 95%, which is huge and can be demoralizing, but it can also be, and to me, it just suggests how much opportunity there is to shave that down. And obviously you're not going to get to 0% non-value add because there's basically value add, non-value add. There's value add, there's incidental, and then there's waste. So incidental activities would be like things that are necessary, but that the customer, when asked directly, would probably say they don't want to pay for them, right? Like no one cares about me racking parts for paint. They just care about the paint landing on the part. And in fact, in a book I just read, he was talking about painting the air as a way to express overspray, which I thought was hilarious. Anyway, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you been up to thinking about?
So I have been thinking about space and then information visibility a lot, as we've talked about. A little very brief preamble is my interest in this is kind of because I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And I think I burned up a lot of my, I'm just going to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I burned that up on things that didn't really go anywhere. So I'm in this space now where I'm not, and I have a child now. I'm in a space where I'm not willing to just work all day, every day. I also want to make a living.
Right.
And so my interest in all of this is really about just trying to survive, sort of.
It seems like you've been doing a lot more than surviving. So
sure. Yeah.
Which is nice.
I think,
but yeah,
definitely when I talk to friends who work in big companies, I'm like, I don't make any money compared to you.
Totally.
But we are surviving well. But in the business, wanting to be able to run this business on a daily basis without feeling exhausted and overworked, and like there wasn't 20, 30, 40 things that were being dropped every single day. So that's been kind of my motivation, is just like, how do we make this work? And these seem like very obvious. There's a lot of very obvious low-hanging fruit once you start to apply the lean principles, Toyota production principles. And the last part of that preamble was in reading the Toyota production system. The Toyota way. They kind of gave like a picture of the circumstance in which that the Toyota production system evolved. And I was like, that sounds exactly like what I do.
In what way?
Obviously different because they were already a very large company. I'm a very small company. But it was just that trying to create a wide variety of products on minimal equipment with minimal capital in a small space comparatively. For a car manufacturer, they had almost no equipment, very little space, very little working capital to work with. And I was like, that's a job shop, basically. It's a little different in that they did, make their own product, but for all intents and purposes, it's the problems that we face. So that was sort of my aha moment.
Interesting.
And I keep trying to kind of come back to that every time I'm like going back to conventional wisdom or being like, we need more space or we need this or we need that. I'm like, okay, do we need it? Or is it just that I need to reframe my perspective or whatever? So I'm thinking about space a lot because we bought a new machine at the end of the year, Brother R450, which we were joking about earlier that I sold it to my employees as being very small and compact. And to my wife as being very small and compact. And when they all saw it, they did not agree with my
but it looks like it fits
interpretation. It does fit. And kind of where I was going with this is that being in a small space forces efficiency. There are some things that you can't get around, as we've discussed, like my saw. The layout of the saw is just terrible. It requires the operator to walk pretty much as far as possible every time they use the saw to get to the control and bring stock back. So that's something we're just going to have to live with, I think, for now, until I scheme a little more.
Yeah.
But working in a really small space forces us to be efficient because the inefficiencies are so obvious.
Right.
I guess some people might argue that in a small space, you don't have to walk super far. So maybe the inefficiencies aren't as obvious, but like it's different than someone having to walk all the way across a giant production building every time they need something. But we kind of are faced with just physically running into things.
Yeah, that's probably a bit of a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, it hides some inefficiencies, like the tool is only 5 steps away when it should really be at arm's reach.
Yeah.
But also,
yeah,
much more. Yeah.
So I
just can't like stack whip work in process.
Yeah.
Because you have nowhere to put it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been just kind of appreciating that actually. And kind of a month ago, I was like, we're going to move in 3 or 4 months. And then over the past month, getting this machine in and rethinking our layout, I've been like, maybe we should really just like see how far we can take it in this space.
That's funny you say that. So typically if you fully lean a process, it takes like 60% of human labor out and 40% reduction in floor space.
Yeah.
And actually we've seen that. And I've sort of had the same thought of like, man, like I'm bending over backwards and trying to like come up with so many workarounds for the fact that we don't have space, which feels like a huge waste of time sometimes. And but then more recently, I'm sort of like, yeah, exactly. How far can we push this? And also, those aren't really inherent in a small space. That's inherent in like linking processes and like all these. Like it's all directions you want to go anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to give myself work in process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going to our supposed format, the improvement we made this last week was kind of the bringing the new machine in forced a lot of things to move because there wasn't room the way it was previously laid out. And so there was just a big rethink of where everything in the shop went, aside from the main machines. I did sort of consider moving them all, but at the end of the day, they kind of were already mostly where they needed to be. And so Ariel, my first employee, she kind of had 3 stations. She handled all of our tumbling, she handles our laser marking and our shipping. And those were at like 3 corners of the shop.
Nice.
And like every time I like shipped a package, I'd like walk over to the computer where the printer was, make my label, walk back, take a measurement of my box because there was nowhere to put the box at the computer. Walk back, print the label, walk back, put it on the box. I was like, this is crazy. Also, the way all of those things were, those three workstations were just kind of not configured well. They were like very tight. So we modified some shelves, i.e. tore them mostly out. Did a big purge of a lot of my personal stuff that has accumulated in the shop over the last 10 years. And then we didn't put the tumblers right next to this station because she didn't want to work next to tumblers all day, which is very fair.
Yeah.
But we put our finished product shelf. So the products that we do ship and sell, we put that right next to the packing station. And then at essentially in the same place, you just turn around 180 degrees is the laser marking and shipping computer.
Oh, nice.
Because those run off the same computer right now. So basically, and it's all in a corner that was mostly dead space. Nice. We had our tumblers back there on the shelf, and then the shelf was covered in like random electrical and, things that we sort of needed, but were not well organized and didn't need to be there because they weren't.
And where do you put them? Just out of curiosity.
So listeners won't be able to visualize very well, but in the back corner, we have that little room with the water heater in it. And,
so just to like less useful space, but you kept them in the shop. I was curious if you threw them away just because I have boxes of like all this auxiliary equipment.
Well, so basically the top of that had a bunch of random stuff on it.
Okay.
We threw most of that away.
Okay. Nice.
And then the stuff that we decided to keep off the shelves is going in bins on top of there. And I bought a ladder that's dedicated so that you can climb up there easily instead of just being like, every time you walk over being like, I could go get a ladder or I could just reach up here and shove it. So all the electrical, plumbing, pneumatics, everything's going in bins on top of there. And then the former shelf, we still have like our air dryer lives on top of it just because it was a convenient spot. But it'll basically just be packing supplies and a few other things that we might need often.
Interesting.
So that was just a very cool thing to be like, okay, we have this very finite space. Let's figure out how to use it. Let's get rid of anything we don't need. Kind of the basic lean mentality.
Yeah. So that's funny. I think like for years when I was watching lean tours, oh, there's a dog. The like almost absurd level of cleanliness and orderliness in the space, felt like I sort of wondered how much that was a bit of like I don't know how much this dog is coming through, but probably a lot. How much of that was sort of this like, not ego thing, but sort of like, it felt again, sort of like, okay, should I be cleaning or should I be not wasting my time, but should I take the time to like polish my floor or,
right.
And I think it's funny hearing you say that. I think like,
make sure it's not I could just tell him to.
Oh, there he is. He's over here.
Oh. Hi, Aldo. Go on, bud.
We'll fix this in post.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like seeing that crazy level of organization. And
Aldo, go on.
All right. Should I start from
just seeing that crazy level of organization?
Yeah, I think in watching shop tours, seeing the level of organization and cleanliness I wasn't sure how much of it was like stuff I should be doing. It felt like a goal rather than a means to an end. And I think what I'm realizing is that it is absolutely a byproduct of absolutely needing to know at a glance when things are out of their normal operating parameters, or like at a glance, just like visual controls, like you glance at the shipping area and know that you can ship a package and not get halfway through and realize the tape measure is across the room or that the whatever is somewhere else. And like, I didn't realize until we started doing some of those other things, how much time that saves. like visual control, you glance at a station and you know the state of that station. Like the tools are shadow boarded. And I was like, why would you take the time to shadow board things? Then it also reduces the ability to change your layout. So like the second you want to make a change, suddenly it's harder. And then you go, should I throw away this shadow board? Should I bother re-shadow boarding the whole thing? Or should I?
Yeah.
And like, I think it is absolutely just like all these other things that we were sort of talking about. They are not tools. They are not like goals in and of themselves. They are means to an end. And like, once you sort of start down that road, like, wow, we really need to get the most out of our space. You sort of start doing a lot of the things that.
Yeah. I would add a piece to that, which I feel like is often not discussed at all, but was brought up a lot in the Toyota way. Mm-hmm. Which is just the sort of from a management perspective, creating a place where people want to work and creating a place where people feel like they have agency and buy-in.
Yeah.
And part of that is having super cool processes that are fun to be a part of. The other part is just like being somewhere that's like clean and warm and like a nice place to be. And I think that people often overlook how important that is to a lot of people. Well, probably to everybody to some extent.
I'm definitely guilty of that. We just insulated the barn and it's only half insulated.
Same here. Like, and especially when I first when I first hired an employee, I kind of looked around and was like, oh my God. Like years of my accumulated half-done projects, just so dirty. I didn't like basic things. Like I didn't have a recycling bin. I just like piled my boxes on the floor and once a month probably.
I would like to say I don't have that situation, but
yeah, well, it was highly motivating to have people that you're accountable to and who have to live with your mess and little stuff like
who don't have to live with your mess.
Right. Can go exactly. They do not have to. They can leave. Little quality of life things like, ours are just a milk crate screwed to a wall, but a cubby where someone can put their personal stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think cleanliness and those things really, really tie into that same principle of creating a place where people want to be.
But so you touch on you said a word that is triggering. No, no. Quality of life improvements. I feel like there's so many things on Instagram, YouTube that are sort of like, oh, we bought 5 new desks that look all minty fresh. As a quality of life. Like it's just a no-brainer for us. We just went ahead and made that purchase. And then you go ahead and look them up and they're $1,200 a piece. And I'm like, okay, $6,000. Like what would I do with $6,000? How do you think about, or what would be like, I think it's more than quality of life as you're talking about. Like, I think that's shorthand and maybe not super useful shorthand, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's another, like, throw a tool at a process. People throwing a tool at something that's a process.
Like, what do you mean?
Like, we're just going to buy shiny things. Like, that's not necessarily quality of life. Keeping the floor clean is quality of life.
Okay.
And sometimes buying shiny things is genuine quality of life improvements. But I think, like you're talking about, a lot of it is like, you don't have to necessarily buy things to make a space nice to be in.
Yeah.
So, but were you going to ask like how I decide what I'm going to spend money on?
I guess so.
It might depend on sort of what the context is. Like, I think for a lot of things, we use the same sort of rubric we would for general shop improvements, like what's annoying. Mm-hmm. So like I just bought a bunch of tape measures because we're always looking for tape measures, and we're going to color code them to each station. Excellent. And then have a few floaters that can be wherever because they're going to walk.
Right.
So that's sort of like this is annoying. We need these. That's a sort of a typical sort of lean improvement. Right. And then there was a not so typical one, which was like, we have a little area where we make tea and crackers and stuff. And I was like, this is gross. It's at head height. It's not convenient. And so I paid Coram, who's a good woodworker, the newer employee, to, restructure a wall and put in a counter.
Interesting.
like, what is that? The ROI on that? No idea. But we all really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're building this loft right now, and right now the floor is plywood.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Like, it does not stay clean. It's not even painted plywood. It's just like raw, dusty plywood.
Yeah. And it's all raining down on your heads, probably.
Yeah. There's all that. And yeah, I don't know. It's just a tough, like, where we're at. We could sink, probably $1,000 into putting down a floor or more.
Sure.
Or we could not do anything, or we could, I don't know. So it's just.
Well, then there's also just the financial thing of like, can we afford this? Nope.
Well, yes. We're not in that camp. We can afford it.
Well, but in the
grand, what do we want to afford?
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I guess I'm sort of at a place where a few $100 a month on random things to make the shop nicer that aren't necessarily towards production.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero question. Spending $1,000 on something like that right now would definitely still be a question for me.
Yeah, maybe it's just like not seat of the pants, but just kind of like a feel of like what makes sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have like a good scientific method sort of analysis tool for this. It's more like I look at my bank account and have a gut reaction and let that guide me, which is not the way that it should be in the long run, for sure. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, a lot of the like human side of things, I think, is sort of hard to quantify. I mean, it was very funny. I was reading this book by Shigeo Shingo just the other day, and I turned a page and it was sort of about human factors and emotions.
Uh-huh.
And in the middle of this like hyper analytical, book, and it was basically like, I forget the quote exactly, but it was like, try to have outside space that people can take breaks in, or if you, or like nice nature, whatever, or at least plant some flowers.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that's cute.
Well, it is like, I think we have this idea that we can be, at the end of the day, if we choose to, purely analytical.
Yeah.
And there has been scientific experiments that have shown that is not the case. That at the end of the day, our decisions always come down to an emotional choice.
Right.
And even like if we use a lot of analysis, when it finally comes to making a decision, it's an emotional choice.
I mean, it seems like a lot of people are running into that problem right now with hiring, and they're losing their workforce. And like, you see this in hospitals right now. There's this crazy thing where they're paying traveling nurses like 3 to 5 times what they're paying their internal people. And people are literally quitting to get rehired as traveling nurses to the same hospital to make more money. Uh-huh. It's like kind of a vicious cycle, but they won't just increase the pay of the people there. And I think like valuing retention, it's sort of hard to put a number on it, but it is a high number, and it's probably higher than most people kind of think about.
I forgot where we were going with that, but I think creating a place where your employees want to be and feel valued is, I mean, you almost can't put a number on it. It's so high. So it's sort of like spend as much as you're comfortable on.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's sort of
nice.
My sense about it. We're at 48 minutes.
Gotcha.
We didn't do either of our little like roundups necessarily.
I have a couple little improvements that were really awesome.
Yeah.
And they're really small. I calculated the volume of my coolant tank, the sump, and then figured out a conversion for the volume of coolant I need to add to change it by X%.
Oh.
And then just wrote that on a label. And now you take a measurement. Whereas before, there's one of the Shigeo things in SMED is like, not in SMED, I forget what book, but anyway, if there's a guess, and you should set, not adjust.
Yes.
And so you basically take a reading of the coolant concentration, and then there's a label that tells you for X% change you want, put in this much volume, and then you pour it in, and that's that.
How do you account for, so you change it at that level, and then do you add water and concentration mix to bring up the whole?
No, we add water every day to bring it to a certain line. And then you take a measurement. And the truth is there's a band of like your tolerance is pretty high. And so I just put a straight up like 1% is 1 quart or something like that.
Yeah.
And I have like a yogurt container sitting right there that has a spot. So that was a big win. Super simple, very, very cheap, and took like 10 minutes to do. And then others got a rework station. So it's for soldering. It's like it blows a little bit of hot air.
Soldering?
What do you solder? Nothing. Someone recommended it. Josh at the Holstery recommended it for melting our thread ends when we sew.
Oh, yeah.
So we used to trim them with a pair of scissors and then hit them with a lighter to melt them back. We just added this thing and it reduces like fatigue because like striking a lighter, 200 times in one day gets old.
It's gonna wear the end of your thumb off.
Yeah. So added that there, and that shaves like 10 to 15 seconds off of each strap. Wow. We are right around 3 minutes per strap for the whole process of assembling a buckle and then cutting the webbing and sewing the strap and bundling it for shipping.
Yeah.
Our goal is 1 minute, but I think that's probably ambitious, but that's sort of the goal. So yeah, I mean, 15 seconds was huge.
That's big.
I think it was $27 on Amazon.
Nice.
So that was big. Other improvements. Oh, we've been making so many. It's hard to remember off the top of my head. I don't know if any come to mind.
Of yours or of
Of
mine?
yours.
Well, the big one this last week was making that new board and Airtable, or new Kanban. They call it Kanban. I feel like that's a bit of a misnomer, but new Kanban, not a board. What do they call it? Anyway, a table essentially to try and organize our work in a way that gives better visibility into where every process is in the shop, or where every part is in its processes in the shop. It was good. I'd been thinking about it for weeks. It immediately highlighted where it's going to fail.
That's cool.
Which is cool and frustrating, but I think it's actually going to lead to some very cool things. You and I discussed this a little bit on the phone last week, but basically I'm working with this concept of how to standardize job shop work, which I think maybe you initially came up with the analogy, but thinking of jobs as a bucket when we receive a job, it's an empty bucket. And by the time it leaves the shop, it needs to be full. And there's a standardized set of things that we have to put in that bucket before it leaves the shop. Yeah,
I think the thought originally my thought was basically your product. It's easy to think about your product as the piece of metal that you ship to the customer, but actually your product that goes through your whole process is each job.
Yeah.
Rather than
it's a set of processes.
Yeah.
And the challenge obviously is the variability of the process and the fact that there are quite a few threads in that process that at certain points have to link up and at certain points are separate or not dependent. There's parts of it that are extremely dependent on the process prior. So where this fell apart is that the Airtable layout doesn't allow you, so far as I can tell in my research, doesn't allow you to have multiple threads, as it were, in one table.
Okay.
So we're having a bunch of situations where things have been done and we click it that it's done, but it happens to be further in the process than something that hasn't been done because they are not dependencies. So I don't get visibility into where that aspect was.
Interesting.
So for the moment, we're just in our like morning meetings, we're going to have like a quick check-in on like where things actually are. But what it's brought me to is that we're going to go to a physical board that will have red, green highlighters for every aspect of the process so that it will be very visible, and just with magnets, where each job is in its bucket filling, as it were.
Nice.
And I think we'll divide that roughly into the different sections and have like a dividing line where things need to come together, as it were.
Right.
Where
they can't cross this line until all the pieces are there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think we have a simple way to tie it to our digital system just with like a simple printout.
Okay.
We might even just use like dry erase magnets and write it out, but I think the printout makes things simple. So anyway, this whole thing of making this table an Airtable really is driving all this other stuff, which I think is going to be a big improvement.
That's awesome.
So I have a cart.
And so things that's going to reduce, hopefully, is what?
The primary thing that's going to reduce, hopefully, is managerial overhead for all of us. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do and what everybody else in the shop is supposed to do. And I think with a small amount of daily input, like even maybe 10 minutes of all of us just having a quick check-in and making sure that the job board matches reality, we should have very clear visibility into the status of everything in the shop. And my hope is it will become extremely obvious what needs to be done.
So that would also be, I mean, things I've noticed in our shop, and we try to flag, we don't do a good job of it, is like every time you ask someone else a question, that is wasting two people's time. And like, why didn't you know the answer?
Right.
I mean, no, you shouldn't know the answer, but like, what piece of information is reliably not getting transferred or put in a visible place? Or
this, and interestingly, this may push us back towards paper towards like a paper traveler, because another thing about the Airtable system is it's really good at collating stuff, but creating templates is not its strong suit, at least not in the way I want to use them, in a way that's like simple to interact with, like a checklist template for job setups. So I may create something where we're using Airtable primarily as a place to dump that information, then print out or something like that. For the actual communication side of things. But that's still a work in process in my head, like not even a work in process, just a work in thought.
But I think, again, it's cool. Like the second you put like you were saying, the Airtable thing you tried to build originally, it was sort of quickly
failed.
The failure. It's like, I think a lot of people, including me, exist in a state of wondering, like, there's a problem, you should solve it, but it's so hard to solve that you don't take any steps. And the second you take a step and standardize one piece of it, it suddenly makes a lot of other stuff very clear that it's a problem. I mean, anyway, so like, it's cool that you did a thing and like you put a stake in the sand, and then it's like, suddenly you're conducting an actual scientific experiment where things are done the same bad way every time. And you're like, oh, here's the next improvement. And like, I feel like you end up moving in a really like good direction.
The other thing, it's not like a specific improvement, but when we hired the new person, we started doing a half hour 3S.
Nice.
At the first day, we're all in the shop in the week because we have different schedules. First day, we're all there. As soon as we're all there in the morning, we do a half hour 3S. And that's honestly what has enabled a bunch of things to happen, because like this particular Kanban board layout, I've been thinking about for a month or two in the middle of the night. And every day it's just been like, oh, can't do that. There's too many other pressing things. I know this is important, but there's no time today. And then this last time I was like, well, I looked around and I was like, you're sweeping, you're organizing our lunch station. I'm going to work on this thing that I've been thinking about. And it took a little more than a half hour, honestly. But just making the space for that has been very key. And then we're trying to do also like a 15-minute little, just like tidy clean every morning.
Interesting. Yeah, we've definitely been trying to figure out, I mean, I guess we should wrap up, but just like how much time to put into improvements.
Excuse me.
Is definitely a question. We're doing about an hour a day. I don't know if it's so hard to untangle, because some of my big projects are just improvements. And so it's like, hard to distinguish,
It's very hard. And then like this last week, that reorganization I was talking about, where we moved all of Ariel's stations and the bench. Excuse me. That was both of them most of a day.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're not done.
Interesting.
So I find that we tend to make big excuse me.
Fix it in post.
We tend to do a bunch of little teeny things, and then we'll have a moment where we do a bunch of big projects.
Interesting. Yeah.
In a flurry, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Another huge improvement we've had, which is funny because we were almost there for like 7 months, but just didn't put the final piece, is a sheet pan for every single setup we run that has all of the relevant information on it. Right there in one place. We used to just like in my, like, that's been on my to-do list for months and months. Sure. And the best part about it is I didn't actually do it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, it was great. So I was just like, hey, Mark, like, have at it, try it. And like, there's definitely stuff, you know, I would have done differently, but it is such a big step. And I was sort of like bummed out about like the use of foam because like the cutting isn't that organized or like neat.
Right.
And then I looked at it and I was like, that's like $3 of foam.
Right. And it's like 1,000% better than nothing.
It is so much better. It's crazy. Yeah. So literally it is a piece of foam on a sheet pan. The sheet pan I think costs $6. The foam is like $3.50. And then the soft jaws for the vise, the gripper fingers are on there. The tool length offset is written next to the gripper fingers. So when you load that gripper into the CNC, you can type that number in, which is annoying that you have to type it, but that's a whole separate question. Should we update the tool length every time? I could write it right in the program where it pushes the new length offset, but I'm so worried that they'll build a bad habit. Like right now, every time we put a new tool in, you're either touching it off or you're entering a number. And like,
I think that's worthwhile. I think it also comes back to the easy to update thing.
Right. Just a label, not typing in. Digging into the G code.
It'd be very easy if you change those fingers to forget to change the code.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then, so there's also an example part on there and an example piece of stock with written out dimensions, like literally cut into the foam.
Nice.
We're still working on SOPs for every single one and like setup instructions for every single one. Down the road, I anticipate needing custom tools, like some parts that will require custom tools. Unfortunately, I'll try to avoid it, but
you mean dedicated tools?
Sorry. Yeah. Dedicated tools and tool holders. And so the thought is to sort of build that in, but it's just so big. So now we have a rolling rack next to the machine that has so it has the tray that goes in the machine that holds all the stock.
Yeah.
Then it has the tray for the setup. And then below it, it has, the tray of stock for that thing. Nice. And then another area that's pulled from that is Kanban of the trays. So that was big.
Cool. That reminds me of one more that we did actually, which is, and also having employees, huge, tasked Quorum with designing a clip-on tag for our sheet pans. So it's still mid-process. We've made just 15 of them. I think printing 5 takes like 12 hours. So it's just kind of like we're printing 5 a day. Mm-hmm. So the concept being we're going to have dedicated trays for each of our customers where all of their fixtures go. Okay. We'll see how that works. But for now, it's a big improvement from everything being mixed together or in some like weird cardboard boxes that didn't quite fit. Yeah. So those will get semi-permanent tags, like stickers put on them. And then we also I ordered dry erase stickers. And so the plan is that we'll put these tags on our stock trays when they get sawn. Oh, cool. And then we can just dry erase marker what the job is on the tray so that it's not just a bunch of ambiguous cut stock on our rack.
And I think what you don't realize every second that you have to look at a tray, go, what stock is this? Is this the correct piece? Wait, let me go ask Devin. What size stock we're meant to run on this job. That's all the stuff that cuts out.
Yeah. And part of this change from pure digital to digital /paper is I'm making a little template in Airtable, little document template where when we get a job, it will send this small template to our rollout printer, which is it's going to be 4. You'll have to cut it apart for now. Okay. But it's going to be on a 4x6 label. It will be 4 stickers that have the job number, the part name, and maybe the stock length or something. So that you can look at this sticker and reference back to Airtable easily and know you're getting the right job. Yeah. We've already had issues where with a repeat customer or a repeat job, somebody has, because this is maybe something for a further podcast, but Airtable is wonderfully flexible. Part of that is that people can engage with it in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And I've found that each of us often finds information in a different way within the system.
Like different views of the same data.
Different views or different ways of getting to this. Like you can follow different paths to the same data.
Gotcha.
In any case, just the other day, one of the employees was looking at a job. It was the correct part, but it was the wrong job. So the quantity was off, and we'd updated an aspect of the job.
Interesting.
So I think like the tool list was slightly different. I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but I was like, oh, not that one. So at least having a tie to the correct job number is going to be a big deal.
And so then that would be also an SOP for viewing Airtable. You could think about
sort of. It's sort of a built-in. Yeah. And then I think we're going to also for another day, but I think we may stick with Airtable, but switch away from this whole ERP system that was built to something that's way slimmed down.
Interesting.
And take the quoting out of it into some other platform and basically just have it be something that's fed from the quoting software and is purely a place to stage data.
So something I read about a little while ago was lean data management. And it's basically like, it's actually always better to not manage data than to manage data if you can.
Yes.
Which I was like, oh, that's a really good point.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Man, we could do so many improvements. An improvement.
I'll just finish up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So that sticker, the 4x6 will print out with like 4 of the identical stickers that you cut out. Mm-hmm. And so the idea will be that we'll stick one on the job board on a magnet so that it's tied. When we put the job on the board, the physical board, we'll just stick one of those stickers. We'll put one on the stock when it arrives, just the pre-cut stock.
Yeah.
And then the others will probably go on the stock tray as things are cut, and then onto the finished parts tray.
Oh, nice.
As things are finished.
That's very cool.
So hopefully it's going to be good.
Yeah. It probably won't be, and then you can improve it further.
Yeah. I need to buy a couple more roll of printers because right now the only one is on the shipping.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. But
how much money to spend where?
Yes.
I had a buildup of triggered Kanbans that were things I was meant to order, and they were just accumulating, and I'd let them accumulate. Shame on me for like a week or two.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I knew that we didn't immediately need them, but like that's all mental work that is waste, and I should have been thinking about something else.
Yeah. We have the same with tooling where Ariel's like, this is triggered, order that. I'm like, we don't really need that.
So
that's
I was kind of like, oh, funny. So it wasn't a cost thing for me. It was just like time.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be 5 minutes. So I thought about like, why am I avoiding it? I was like, well, it takes too long to place that order. How could I make it faster with QR codes? Why am I not adding QR codes to every single one? It's too slow to make QR codes. So my improvement was finding a faster way to make QR codes. So I downloaded an app on my phone to make QR codes that Bluetooth connects to a little sticker printer.
Oh.
And so now in like 2 minutes, I can make a QR code. And so now
that's great
every time. And the ones that have QR codes are so much easier to order. Side note to all of the companies out there, companies where scanning a QR code goes like add to cart purchase, so much better for this workflow. So there are some companies where like their cart system is like, does not lend itself to sort of optimizing.
Interesting.
Which is a pain in the ass. And so I try to avoid using those vendors.
Yeah. Maybe it's that companies need to have a whole different interface for QR code ordering.
Probably. I just think a lot of people aren't thinking about how their customers want to use their thing. Like I was tempted. We just did a job shop thing a little while ago. Maybe you should do this too. I was thinking about sending them a video on Kanban and sending them QR codes, because you can make an email in a QR code. So they would scan it and it would generate an RFQ back to you. So you'd build them the email trigger and explain how they put it into their stock so that they would just like not put off sending you an RFQ for the next quantity.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know.
Interesting. Cool. Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
This week.
Sounds good.
That was a lot of stuff.
Definitely. Thanks for listening. If anyone is listening.
Numero uno in the books.
Yeah. And we'll do it weekly, and just, you can reach me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram. Definitely drop a line if there's any particular ideas you wanted explained or things you'd love to hear more about.
Yep. You can reach me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, or you can go to our website, lichenprecision.com, send us an email, etc. And yeah, anything you want to have discussed on the podcast, I suppose, not that we're experts, more that we're just sharing our explorations, shoot it our way.
Definitely.
Cool.
All right.
Till next week.